Good morning, folks. We apologize for the technical glitch and the delay in starting. Again, I appreciate everyone taking the opportunity to join with us this morning. My name is Dave Blanford. I'm the enterprise sales leader for CDW Canada or Eastern and here in Eastern Canada. Today we have the distinct opportunity of presenting a webinar with you around keeping your data safe while working remotely. We have the opportunity. There was since we're a few minutes late, I'll just transition the presentation over to Ari Saperstein, who is going to be taking us through the deck. Towards the end, we will have a Q&A session, and look forward to having the opportunity.
Hi, my name is Ari Saperstein. I am SC for Cohesity. I cover all of New York City Metro and northeastern United States, as well as Eastern Canada. And I want to thank CDW for hosting this with us today. What we're kind of going to talk a little bit is keeping your data safe while you are working remote. Part of what we're going to talk about some of the cloud capabilities that Cohesity offers for data protection. And we'll talk about some of the things that we think are important in protecting the cloud. And of course, now that people are working remotely, your IT staff is at home as well. And how do we make their lives easier, still protecting data? A lot of customers are moving to the cloud, or they still have stuff on and stuff in the cloud, and making sure that all that is protected, not just from, people deleting files, but also from, any catastrophic events such as malware, things of that nature. So to talk a little bit about Cohesity, we were founded in 2013 with Aaron, who was the co-founder of Nutanix. He's considered the father of hyper-converged technology. And he was also the lead on the Google file system. And mostly the reason why we bring that up is you'll see in the next slide. So we have some very good backing. In fact, we just announced that we had our Series E at $250 million, which in this current economic environment is actually extremely impressive, that people still have, that investors really still have a lot of faith in what we are trying to do. Because again, we're not just about data protection, we're also about, really mostly, our vision is data management. So we use, like I said, so we kind of use this model about Google for a couple of reasons. Mostly because it really helps illustrate what our vision is. So in the days when Google was their first, I would say like their first vision, their first idea was to create a web scale file system that can hold consumer data. This file system essentially has no end, and it has no geographical boundaries, right? No matter where you are, you can access data that Google carries, right? Some of it's the data that we present, some of it's the data that Google goes and gets from the rest of the world. And then they put a layer of manageability over it. And then on top of that, then offered apps and services. For them, their first app and service was search, right? I remember one of the first products they offered on top of after search was Gmail, and I think it was maybe in 2005, I think it was. I had gotten my invitation to join Google Mail. You actually needed an invitation from somebody who had Google Mail in order to get onto it. It was pretty interesting back then. So the idea was that as they added apps and services, right, data itself was really still in the platform itself. So no matter what you go and look for within Google, it's still within their apps and services. It's in their file system. It's stored on their file system. So the idea is that when you go and you search for, let's say me, I'm going to come up with my LinkedIn, my social media program. You probably come up with my address if you were clever enough with it. Now, it's not that all of that data is in different places. It's in one place being served up by multiple apps and services. That's sort of the vision that we see in our data management platform. So we began with the data platform. Our data platform was started as a being powered by SpanFS, which is our web scale file system. What controlling the file system allows us to do then is really open up a much broader area of control of the data management, right? So first off, we can do data deduplication, compression, but most importantly, encryption, both in flight, which is easy, but with rest, which is not so easy, because we create this file system that just simply, right, just if you look at our architecture, our cluster starts at 3 nodes, right, to be able to provide a level of redundancy. And from that, right, we can offer apps and services, everything in our SpanFS that's in our file system, right, then becomes available to whatever apps and services we provide. So we also built our management product called Helios. That is essentially a software as a service product that manages the Cohesity data platform. And I'll go into that a little bit later. Then comes the marketplace. We have the ability to run apps and services on our appliances, right? Appliances are either supplied, we have a set of appliances, and both Cisco and HP have a set of qualified hardware that runs our platform. But for us, where Google's first app search, we figured the first app for us was going. The thinking, of course, is, well, if we want to get people's data onto our SpanFS platform, onto our data platform, the best way to do it is to get the data that people are already doing nothing with, which is backups. Everyone backs up data in a hope that, they're really never going to use it unless something catastrophic happens. So we figured, well, we've got people backing up data. Is there now an offer with that data once it's in our file system? And that's really where our data management is built upon. So the easiest way to get data into our platform was data protection. The second easiest thing, which we've been talking about recently, has been our smart files, which is our NAS capabilities. That we can offer NFS and SMB and S3 storage to your users. Now that we have your unstructured data in our platform, we have your unstructured data, we have your backup data, and for most customers, that pretty much consists of about 80 to 90% of their entire data. Now, once we've got the data on our platform, we can do these apps and services, right? We can do things like antivirus scanning. We can do things like Splunk. We can do things like doing searches for files as well as the searching within files. We can do business intelligence. We can do machine learning, all sorts of different data warehousing, things of that nature, that instead of having to do it in your production environment, which would take resources out of production, we can actually do that stuff on the backup data that we have on our platform and make that data useful, whereas before it was just sitting around doing nothing, waiting for some sort of catastrophe. So our software-defined platform is, we have on physical hardware, right, that from our hardware or HP and Cisco. We then have a virtual edition of the data platform as well that can run on a hypervisor. We have one for the edge, where a very simple one kind of box for remote offices, and of course the data platform for the cloud, so that we can run our data platform out in the cloud, and all managed by Helios, right? All managed by that one manageability product. So the idea then is we bring all of this together, and also because it's software defined, the same software is everywhere. So from a learning curve point of view, there's really no learning curve because we're faced with the same exact interface, and that's the thing. So normally when you've got clusters on-prem or virtual edition, when you log into Helios, you're going to see all of that. If something should happen to your on-prem, now you need to go and do recovery from the cloud or from another cluster. All of that's done in the same interface. So being done in the same interface is out. There's no learning curve different learning curve for once you're in a disaster and everything's got to be brought back up because you've been working on the same platform. So now that a lot of us are remote and we've got, this idea that we we may need to move workloads to the cloud. We also have an idea that we may need to look at our data protection a little bit differently now because we necessarily have to pick up tapes, right? Tape is dead, long live tape. And for some odd reason, we've never been able to get rid of it. So what we've really decided is looking at the platform, really kind of looking at the cloud as a viable solution for data protection. We found that there are really kind of 6 pillars that a cloud protection product should be able to provide for you. So obviously the first one is long-term retention in the cloud. Like I said, tape is dead, long live tape. The idea of being able to send data to the cloud, leave it there, and again, just like tape, you kind of hope that you never needed to go back that far in the distant past, but you may need to for any number of reasons, right? But this way, you've got the tape almost like nearline, where the data, I'm sorry, nearline, where as before it was offline, right? As before you had, you spit out all the tapes, you put them in a box, somebody came and picked up that box, and then if you needed the data, somebody had to bring back the tapes in that box, somebody had to load all the tapes, things of that nature. So it was really offline. Once you move that long-term retention to the cloud, it's essentially nearline because as long as you have connectivity to the cloud from some internet access, you've got access to your data. The other pillar we found was tier data to the cloud, saying, okay, well, as our data protection, our unstructured data continues to grow and data continues to grow, is that we should be able to extend the file system in some way to the backup. The backup should have an extension where I can say, hey, you know what? Stuff that we haven't touched for a really long time needs to go somewhere. This way, we don't have to continue to buy more hardware in order to support our data growth. So being able to tier things to the cloud, things that haven't been used in a while. And then of course, the distant past that needs to be brought back is typically not the same SLA as something from last night's backup, week's backup. The other pillar that we found is important is copying VMs to the cloud. So kind of the idea is that we should be able to use the cloud in some way as a disaster recovery mechanism. Then, of course, the other pillar becomes protecting that native data, those native cloud applications and being able to protect them, right? So now if we now go look at long-term strategy for where our applications are, well, some of them might fit in the cloud very nicely. Some of them we want to just extend VMs out there or use some of the really amazing tools that the cloud providers have provided for building applications in a different way, not just, spinning up operating systems and running applications, like AWS offers, remote data services where essentially you're running a database. It looks like a database, smells like a database, tastes like a database, but it's not necessarily in a VM that you manage, you're just managing a database. So obviously those cloud applications also need to be protected. We also need to be able to replicate to and from the cloud, right? So from a disaster recovery standpoint, we want to be able to replicate stuff out to the cloud and then use it maybe for a short time. Maybe we need, we're doing some moves, we're doing some scheduled maintenance, maybe unscheduled maintenance, things of that, be able to fail virtual machines to the cloud, right? We want to run, on-premise during their normal operations, but we want to be able to move them to the cloud for any number of reasons, and then of course bring them back, right? To be able to provide that last pillar of VM disaster recovery with cloud, right? Replicate them to and from. So in order to cover those pillars, we have essentially 4 cloud products. The first one is cloud, And the idea of cloud, right, is to be able to send data to the cloud there for long-term retention, entirely unlike tape. So I want to say, you know what, I want to keep 30 days worth of backups on-prem. Anything older than 30 days, we're going to send up to the cloud. Again, we then create a SLA based on the ability to bring it back from the cloud. So, okay, so the last days, right, we have an RTO, RPO maybe of 15 minutes, maybe an hour, whatever it is. And anything in the distant past beyond those 30 days, obviously will have a different RTO. The cloud tiering then is also a way for us to extend the file system into the cloud. I mentioned earlier, that's cloud tier is out. How do we expand the file system? How do we take blocks that you're typically not using and move them into the cloud in order to save on-prem disk storage space, which comes at a cost, right? So the stuff that we're not using, we really should keep in deep storage, which of course, again, will not only incur cost, but will also incur, a performance hit when bringing it back. But again, this is something from the distant past. So the idea is anything from the distant past we can put in the cloud that we're not going to access on a regular basis. The third thing is what we do for our data cloud. So there are a number of advantages to up a Cohesity cluster in the cloud, AWS or GCP. And the idea is it looks and tastes just exactly like if it were on-prem. They're just somewhere else. As far as Helios is concerned, it just looks like another cluster. And that allows us to do things and failback. It allows us to do things like what I'm going to talk about next with Cloud Spin. And the idea really is I could even have, I don't even maybe even need an on-prem Cohesity cluster. Maybe I could have one in the cloud. Maybe I want to be able to protect stuff that's in the cloud and whatever that people have, that customers have, you can then decide like how and where am I running my clusters. The last, of course, is Cloud Spin. And what's really great about Cloud Spin is it's going to allow us to take our backups, right, our data protection, and take VMs and copy them out to a cloud provider, and then such a way that they can be as virtual machines on that cloud provider, right? So the idea then is we can take a VMware VM, right, and spin in AWS. Those processes to get them from one environment, one hypervisor environment to another is actually kind of tricky, and it takes a lot of tools that the cloud providers offer, and 80% of the use cases, the speed and performance of that process is sufficient. The issue really kind of becomes use it a disaster recovery. What do we need? Well, we need those VMs up and running a little bit faster than just having to wait for all of these processes to occur. So that's kind of what we do with Cloud Spin. So with Cloud Spin, what we're able to do is pre-build all of those VMs. So if I have a VMware VM and we want to move it to AWS, it might take that process, let's make believe takes an hour. Let's say we have a lot of data, and we've got to move all that stuff around and get it into the proper format. Let's say it takes an hour. If I can do that after every single backup, so now I have that VM sitting in AWS, ready to be. This way, all of that stuff is already done in order to meet a real great SLA for disaster recovery in the cloud. I talked a little bit about Cloud Archive, the cloud tier again. I'm sorry, I had a little bit of problem advancing the slides, so I kind of had to talk through them. So I apologize. But again, with CloudSpin, we also can create policies, so we can things like let's back up a virtual machine every hour. As soon as it's done, do the cloud spin, or we could say just cloud spin it once a day, right? It's a matter of how much data that we're bringing over, things of that nature. That also does not require Cohesity to be running in the cloud. The cloud spin we can do without a Cohesity cluster sitting in the in the cloud data center. But if we want to do fail back, right? So we can fail over, that's great to the cloud, but in order to fail back, if we need to fail back, we actually do need the Cohesity data platform. We do need a Cohesity cluster in the cloud in order to bring everything back. So obviously this runs in AWS, Azure, GCP, same kind of ideas that we have 3 nodes, right? Now, we haven't really found the maximum number of nodes. We just haven't been able to test that large. We've tested over thousands, and our right, it's a web scale technology, so it pretty much almost has no end. Right, the cloud edition allows us, like I said, to replicate to an. We also have the full feature set of the Cohesity data platform available, and also do native cloud data protection right from the cloud without any egress charges, moving anything to on-prem, or you might need to. It all depends. Once you have Cohesity clusters in different areas, you have the ability to make choices as to where and when and how data is moved from one to another. So some common use cases for the cloud edition, obviously, is things like disaster recovery, things like cloud native backup, but most importantly also is that it can be done, you can also use it to do a dev test kind of environment. Again, being able to cloud spin VMs, right? Being able to rapidly clone from a backup and then bring them into the native compute, into the native cloud compute. So if we need to spin up an environment for developers or for testers, or maybe something went wrong and somebody's got to figure out what is that, we can give an environment, right? Run it out in the cloud instead of having to go and scramble to find production resources or dev test resources on the fly. We can actually use what the cloud is, one of the greatest uses for the cloud, which is, infrastructure as a service. Hey, I need, more VMs, I need whatever, and we were able to bring that up. So those are some of the common use cases that we see for people using the Cloud Edition product, the Cloud Edition clusters in the cloud in AWS or Azure or GCP. And again, lastly, is Helios putting all of these things together, right? Being able to manage all the different clusters, no matter where they are, no matter what platform they're on, gives us the ability to search through all of the data, being able to do file recovery, database recovery, Oracle, SQL, Exchange, Office 365, all of these different types of recoveries that we would be able to do, all from this one management platform. The web scale part, really kind of simple, right? If one, let's say in this diagram, let's say New York needs another cluster, or one cluster needs another node, you simply build the other node. You're going to go in and click the button that says add node, and it does what it needs to do to bring that cluster into the node. Helios also allows us to do things like in-place upgrades. So as a cluster is running, we can upgrade the different nodes one at a time so it doesn't impact services. And if you kind of look, if you look at a lot of other backup products that are just another backup product, making those systems redundant is actually kind of difficult. It's not natively built for redundancy. We look, of course, our vision is more of data management, and data protection is sort of like a means to an end. Because we're providing services and data management services, obviously these clusters need to be redundant, which is why the clusters start at 3, so we can at least offer a replication factor of 2. We have 2 copies of the data within the 3 nodes, and we support all sorts of different erasure coding in order to get us to different protection levels depending on how big our clusters become, right? So really, once we have that management platform, it really allows us this single pane of glass to manage the environment. The other thing that Helios allows us to do is help us install apps and services into the environment. So under the hood, the Cohesity platform is running a version of CentOS, and our software is running there, as well as containers managed by Kubernetes. So the idea is that things like SlamAV, which is available, other antivirus available on the marketplace. If you go to marketplace.cohesity.com, you'll actually see all of the services that can be, all the apps and services that can be installed into our clusters, and they're categorized basically. So Helios then manages the download of those applications, the install of those applications to all the different nodes that you select it to, and also the running of them, the management of them when they need to be upgraded, things of that nature. So if I want to be able to search through all my data, let's say for social security numbers, I could, using one of our apps, we could put in a regex that says, find me every single 3 digits, dash 2 digits, dash 4 digits, and you've now found Social Security, US Social Security numbers. If I want to be able to find any file that may have in clear text somebody's credit card, right? I could say, hey, find me 4 digits, space 4 digits, space 4 digits, space 4 digits. Okay? We can also find any file that's, from Bob to Paul. Hey, I want to find all of these points from the two of them, and we can be able to search. And that's really what Helios, the searching capability, really allows us to do, and do it the entire platform, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's on-prem, New York, London, Las Vegas, Ontario, wherever your clusters reside, we're able to manage the environment. So having that now, the other thing is also, as I mentioned earlier, is Helios is a software as a service, which means it's not something that's going to go down. It's fully redundant, it's in the cloud, and it is all secure, obviously. The amount of data that we can see, right, that Cohesity can see is none, unless, of course, we're talking about then going to support and you open up a support case, and we're able to see a certain amount of data about your clusters, but not the data in your clusters. Right? So it also allows us to do, during a support case, to be able to allow, so the customer can then, you guys can allow a support person to come in and help troubleshoot and see logs, and you can upload logs and things of that nature, all done through Helios. And again, if something catastrophic happens, your management product, right, what you're using to manage the environment, didn't go down because it's provided as a software as a service. So providing that software as a service management on top of redundant clusters, on top of clusters in multiple regions that can have multiple copies of the data, we really created a data management infrastructure that carries your environment, whether you're on-prem, you have colos, whether you're in the cloud, whether you're moving from one place to another, from one hypervisor to another, whatever, so many different use cases really within this environment, within this platform, that make it extraordinarily flexible. When we look at the apps and services that we want to run against the data, we have the data in our platform. Now we're running apps in our platform. So now the data and the applications, basically what we're doing is essentially bringing the data to the compute and the compute to the data. Right? Instead of having servers that are doing searches and servers for different purposes, reading all the production data, right? Making the data on one side and the compute on the other, this now puts together the compute and the storage into one platform, one place, to be able to protect your environment, find data that you need. Maybe you're looking for multiple copies of data. How many times does Bob have this spreadsheet? So the idea really is to make that redundant, to make it safe, right? One of the other things is obviously that there are a lot of products in the what I would call the just another backup domain, right? That are just another backup. A lot of those products are based on Windows, and Windows has a tremendous, tremendous footprint for attack. Linux versions less so, right? Not that anything is entirely secure, right? As we know, the only secure computer in the world is one turned off in a closet somewhere, right? So we want to be able to create an environment for data protection, for data management that is as safe as we can possibly make it. Customers that see our vision are real that's really what our customers choose us for. Um, as somewhat of uh, a new solution in this environment, a lot of manufacturers struggle with getting into the enterprise, right, into larger customers, and you typically start an SMB and then try to move up. We really created this environment for the enterprise in mind. And what that means is that we really see that enterprise customers really need the redundancy, the data management, looking at being able to use the data that they are picking up every day. And that's really what draws people to Cohesity, this vision of ours that data that we're backing up, our unstructured data, even if that unstructured data is sitting around for the last 10 years untouched, can be made important. We can look at trending, we can run all these apps and services on that data, and looking at the platform gives us data management and it gives us that data protection, right? So we're really killing a bunch of birds with a stone. We're really creating an environment, a platform for data management. How do we get all this data important? So I've kind of gone through this a little bit quicker because I realized that we were kind of pressing for time. So I know that we want some Q&A, and I think we actually had some pre-written questions. If somebody wants to start reading the pre, and we can have a little discussion about some of the questions that we've received, and if people want to ask questions going forward.
Okay. So there were some questions around security, and I think you covered some of those. So one of the questions was, what are some security issues with staff using remote desktops from home to access remote machines?
So in that area, from looking from a really from a remote desktop, I'm not really certain that that's kind of what we cover. Right. When really what we're talking about here is the ability to manage the backup infrastructure safely, securely, and do recovery and data protection and normal operations in a secure fashion, right? Again, all of the data that we're sending when a user logs in, which is all role-based access, and a user logs into the Helios product, obviously all of that's encrypted. The data, whatever metadata that we're using that comes back and forth from Cohesity clusters into Helios, all of that is encrypted and protected.
Great. Another question was, what cloud tools are you using to secure the data access?
So I would say that first off, when we put data in the cloud, we encrypt all of that data, right? So what's really great is that on our platform, because again, we own the file system that we're writing to, we are able to do data reduction and encryption in the same one fell swoop, so to speak. The idea then is anytime that we move data, it's encrypted. What's also great is we are able to create multiple, called a storage domain, which is sort of like a logical separation of the environment. So for example, if we've got a finance department and we want to do all the backups and data protection for finance, we might create that no one else should be able to recover. We might want to create a storage domain that is encrypted with a different key than the one for HR or the one for IT. So we can create different storage domains. And as we replicate data back and forth, as we do cloud tiering, as we do cloud archiving, all of that encryption follows. And then we can use role-based access to say to define who has access to which data for either recovery or for searching or for other apps that access data. They'll only be able to see the data that they need to see. So obviously moving data to and from the cloud and having users manage, like having your IT staff manage the data, obviously encryption in flight and encryption in rest is extraordinarily important.
Great, thank you. Does Cohesity support VMware to Hyper-V migration?
Yes.
Great. I'm just trying to find some of the other questions. Yeah, I think that's all I see, unless I don't see any other questions. Do any of the other panelists see any of the other questions?
I don't. If any attendees do have questions, feel free to jot them down on the Q&A panel on your screen, and we'll endeavor to get back to you right away. So if you have any, feel free to fire away. I don't see any right now, Jennifer, but if anyone does, feel free to jot them down, and we'll spend the next couple of minutes responding.
Absolutely.
So
okay, well, we'll give it another couple of minutes, and then Ari, go ahead.
So what I'm saying is obviously working with your CDW rep, they have access to me, right? I am the SE that handles, all the technical stuff for all of our partners. And then I'm able to bring other resources in both to CDW and to the customers, to you guys, to be able to work on, figure out, what is the best way to manage, to create, to migrate, right? From, if you're using a backup system and maybe it doesn't have the kind of remote tools that one needs to be able to manage the environment, well, that's a really good discussion to have. Like, okay, well, how are we going to change our data protection strategy in order to not just fit in, to fit in cloud strategies, but also to make sure that we can manage that stuff, all of our data protection from without instead of within, right? We're living in an age where we have to be able to manage our data no matter where we are. I think that's, and looking at those solutions and how to sew those all in together, right? I mean, CDW has a tremendous platform of products. We are one of those. So there's always a solution that may require one or two or five different things, and that's what really, the CDW can help bring in those aspects for you. And of course, a lot of the SEs and a lot of the sales reps that we have within our company, within Cohesity, have been in the industry a very long time. I've been doing this longer than I would like to admit. And what that really gives us is a real clear vision of how to work with our partners and our customers to say, hey, you know what, we're not really interested in selling you a product. This is part of a solution that helps our customers in their day-to-day in order to do more with less, in order to do more from anywhere else, in order to really organize and prioritize the different parts of your infrastructure. So we may be a small part of that, and that's kind of what, how CDW and us, and our expertise in our, within our infrastructure to really be able to help create a solution.
That's great. Thanks, Ari. So I can close off unless there's any other questions that come through as we just conclude the meeting today. I want to thank everybody very much for attending. We do apologize for the technical issues at the beginning and starting a little late, but appreciate everybody hanging in there with us. We will, of course, do a tally of the attendees for today's webinar. And we will, you will receive a note from your CDW account manager as to the generous donation that we've been able to make on behalf of you folks participating and Cohesity and CDW. So you should receive a note to that donation in the next couple of days. And if there is nothing else, once again, we appreciate you attending and we will talk to everybody soon.